Welcome back. I'm here with Kristi Ashton, and we're giving another COVID update for the Williamsport Retirement Village campus. And so welcome back. Kristi, several questions. Testing and reopening are big questions, things that we're spending a lot of time operating on. Let's start with the testing. Each week we're testing staff. There's also testing of the residents. Can you give us a testing update, please?
Sure, I'd love to. So mandate from a couple weeks ago says that all nursing homes in Maryland must do a weekly testing of all of their staff members. So that's what we've been doing. Gratefully, we're still negative. We haven't needed to include the residents in that testing because, as the mandate states, that's not necessary. But we are testing them, our residents, on the basis if they have symptoms. So we're doing for symptoms, and then also if they were to have a procedure that would require going to the hospital, they would also be tested in the hospital before that procedure. But testing overall is going well.
Okay, very good. Also, lots of questions about opening the facility. What are the pieces that need to go into that? The state is developing some prerequisite work that we need to have in place, things that we need to have in place before we can actually open. Can you talk some about those?
Certainly. So there's a lot of criteria to work through. It's about 6 pages worth of criteria for nursing homes specifically to be able to reopen. So some of the things that the document outlines that I really appreciate, all of us do, is that there's certain restrictions that will not be lifted. Or certain things that will not be lifted, such as the screening of our staff whenever they come in for their shift, as well as the screening for the residents that happens on a daily basis. So we're looking at symptoms with that screening and vital signs for the residents daily. So that won't be relaxed. The Westview Terrace cohort that we have, the observation unit, that will remain unchanged. Let's see what else I have here. So the face mask, the universal face mask use will also remain in place. And I would say that, looking at the phases that have been outlined for us, we meet most of that criteria. In order to begin working, there's a pre-phase to phase 1, and then it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I would say we're in the pre-phase to phase 1, and really just for one particular reason. It's our PPE, it's the way we're using gowns. There's strict criteria from the CDC and the state that says how you're supposed to be using gowns, and we have a national shortage of gowns. So that's really the big thing that we're contending with in the way of PPE. But we have some strategies, got a lot of brainstorming around that, so we're working on it.
So when we're looking at opening, are we looking at the nursing home the same as we would Twin Oaks at assisted living?
So the nursing home is different, and assisted living is different. They're different in a couple of different ways, but there's 2 separate mandates, 2 different documents. There is definitely some delineation there. For example, assisted living, if you have less than 50 residents at your assisted living, you don't necessarily have to do weekly testing. So there's certainly some differences there.
Okay. Maybe an unfair question, when do you anticipate reopening in some form or fashion?
So it's really difficult to say. That's complex. All of this has been very complex from day one. But it is really difficult to say because, as we're watching on the news, there's hot spots, that are being identified regularly, and community surveillance is super, super important. So you really have to, it can change at the drop of a hat, right? If things continue in the path that they have for Washington County, looking over the next couple of months, we could definitely have some things relax in the way of our restrictions and being able to have folks visit. But even if we're in phase 3, the plan for visitation in phase 3 is still very strict. It's not like we open the doors and you come on in. It's, the state's been very clear to say that there has to be scheduled visits and that only 2 people at a time can go to the patient's room, or there should be a designated meeting area in your facility. So even if we make, when we do make it to phase 3, there's still a lot of criteria that goes into that. So.
Okay. So we're all trying to be patient.
Yes.
And we certainly appreciate your patience working with us on this campus, families, our residents, our staff.
Absolutely.
in lieu of reopening, because reopening feels like we're returning to what we once had, something more normalized, right? In lieu of reopening, what's important to you?
So I think there's a couple of things. So communication, us getting on and having these video chats, I think that's a great line of communication. We have a letter that goes out also. So keeping lines of communication open. Call us if you have a concern or a question to the facility directly. But you'll continue to get the letters, the YouTube updates, the web page updates. All of those things will continue. So I think communication is really, really important, and that's going to remain a constant, obviously. And then the second thing that we have is access. So being able to still have that connection with your loved ones. We're getting very creative around that. We have hugging stations, which is basically like a door barrier, but you're able to creatively get your hands in there and give your loved one a hand or a hug with gloves on. So it's really, really neat. But we're looking at that ways to kind of bolster some visitation that's outside of the traditional visitation, because we don't know how long this thing could last. But we still have the hugging stations, the iPad visits, and phone call, of course. And I think that pretty well covers
some distance, socially distant visiting on the front porch at Twin Oaks, I think, is in the works.
Yes, assisted living. We have talked about that, having where there would have to be social distancing in place. The loved ones would all have to wear masks, and then it would be outdoors as well. That is true.
And all the while, we're really happy to offer that programming, but that programming is time intensive. So we're working with Life Enrichment on a first come, first served basis, trying to have as many people have access to one of those means of visitation as possible, as much as we possibly can.
Yes.
Well, Kristi, thank you so much. Thank you again for tuning in this week, and we'll look forward to speaking to you next week.